Hello, and welcome to this edition of Inside Tacoma. I'm your host, Randall Lewis. Our guest for our conversation today is Mayor Victoria Woodards. Welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I used both of your first names there.
Mayor and Victoria.
Yeah, you did say when you were on our show early in your term that you feared you would lose your first name.
It's no longer rumored. It is true. Even my own mother, I call my mother and I say, "Hey, Mom," and she goes, "Hey, Mayor," and I'm like, "Will somebody call me Victoria?"
Well, that's not a bad thing to have.
Absolutely, it's an honor.
Yeah.
It is an honor. It just is. It's you think about all the things that you anticipate when you get a new job. Because I consider this is my job, right? My service. And so you anticipate a lot of things. That was not something I ever thought about, is losing my first name. But if you're going to lose your first name, Mayor's a pretty good first name to have.
Yeah, it seems like it suits you pretty well, too.
Thank you.
And I know one thing that's really changed about you since you first took office, that I don't know even if you would have predicted it at this point in time, is you're riding a bike to and from work. You live in South Tacoma. It's not like you're just a couple blocks away.
8 miles, or between 7 and 8 miles is what.
How did this come about?
So I was fortunate enough to be able to take a mission trip to, or what we call a master class, to Copenhagen with 10 other electeds, some from Tacoma, some from Pierce County, some from the state. So we, like Roger Milner, Secretary of WashDOT, was with us, and the mayor of Fife and Puyallup, and just several community members, Metro Parks. If I start naming, I'm going to forget somebody, right? But it was a good group of people. When we went back with Downtown on the Go, they got a grant to go back and look at their infrastructure, just their transportation infrastructure. But we spent 5 whole days on bikes. The only time I got in the car was to get to the hotel, and then I got in the car going back to the hotel. By the time I got in the car to go back to the hotel, I felt guilty. I was like, I should be riding a bike or catching a train or doing something. But I've been a big supporter of transportation and infrastructure. I get the difference that it makes. But sometimes when you see it firsthand, it just is really different. We say here in Tacoma, and we'll talk about affordability today, but I think we talk about, making things more affordable. And, in a household, the second largest expense is transportation. So how do we make transportation more affordable? And bikes and more buses and more train infrastructure is a good way to do that. And so, and not only did I learn that, that's really great and the difference that it makes, but I also, just the physical fitness of walking and biking, when you're not actually, focused on working out, can be really good for you. I left there in the best shape I'd been since a campaign when I walked all those miles doorbelling. But it was just a great trip to really learn about infrastructure.
Now, I was in Copenhagen a couple of times in my life, and I remember black bikes everywhere, all over. That's kind of a bike share program that they run, right? People can just ride them as far as they want, and drop them wherever they want.
Yep.
And now we have something like that just starting up in Tacoma.
We do, Lime bikes.
Lime bikes are popping up around our
They are, Lime bikes and Lime scooters. So electric bikes, or e-bikes as they call them, and then scooters. So let's do one thing really quickly so the viewing audience knows. An electric bike does not mean that you get on the bike and hang on. Doesn't work that way. You gotta pedal, but it's kind of like if you pedal once, it helps you pedal twice. So it gives you a boost, but most people say, well, an e-bike, that's not exercise. Oh, yes, it is, because you still have to pedal in order for it to assist you. But it's certainly, the other day, the city of Tacoma even just got added some more e-bikes, added e-bikes to its fleet. And I rode a city bike from a meeting downtown on Pacific to a meeting on MLK. And I rode straight up the hill on an e-bike. And so you can get around Tacoma if you're not, one of those really great in shape, workout every day, ride a bike every day people, you can hop on an e-bike and make it up the hills in Tacoma just fine.
How slow do you wind up going up the hills on a pedal assist?
I mean, I tell you what, I went faster than I walked. Okay. And another thing is I exerted less energy. So by the time I got to the top of the hill, I wasn't out of breath. I hadn't, I was in my business clothes because I was attending a meeting. I didn't feel like I needed to go take a shower before I could talk to anybody again. So, I mean, they make it really convenient. And I think that's what it's about. For people to use alternative modes of transportation outside of having to, we've got to make it convenient. So adding new electric buses to our fleet, and BRT that we're talking about going down Pacific Avenue. I mean, those are the things we've got to do as a city. People want to get there conveniently and quickly. And for a reasonable price. And if I can get on a bus or get on a train or get on a bike that is quicker than the car parked in my driveway, I'm more apt to do that if it's easier for me to do that and if it's safe for me to do that.
Right. Yeah. The thing with Lime Bikes is just here for a short period of time.
Yep, 60 days.
Okay.
With potential renewables, but 60 days. And the whole idea of the 60 days is to find out what works in Tacoma. Right? What makes it possible in Tacoma? And so what we hope will happen in the 60 days is that we'll hear from citizens, businesses alike that say, you know what, okay, there's too many sitting in front of my business on the sidewalk, or you know what, I love this. I mean, I've read a little bit on Facebook and I'm hearing good things, and even I've gotten one complaint so far, and the person who sent me the complaint didn't say take them away. It said, can we change the speed on them? So I mean, so people are really being thoughtful, and other than just saying I don't like them, give us some real good feedback about what works for Tacoma.
Now, I do want to ask this question. We're going to talk about affordability here,
sure.
But I want to get into it this way, because one of the things that was like a criticism of Uber and Lyft when they first came to town and tried to replace the legacy taxi industry is because we have a lot of folks in Tacoma who do not have smartphones.
Yep.
Because they're expensive to keep and operate. They don't necessarily have electronic banking available to them.
Right.
And that's why legacy cabs make sense for a lot of people, lower income folks, and others who just don't want to be involved with technology like that.
Yeah.
Now, Lime Bikes does have an app, but I understand there's also a way you can use them without having the smartphone access on that other.
That is true. And the other thing that Lime Bikes does that is great is that they also, for low income, there is a discounted program. I believe it is 95% off for the bikes and 50% off for the regular bikes, and then 50% off the cost for e-scooters and e-bikes. So when we talk about equity and everybody having an opportunity, Lime Bikes makes that possible.
All right. That's kind of the fun issue. I mean, it's fun to have those kinds of problems that people are complaining about Lime Bike leaning against their building or something like that. That's an interesting problem to have. But affordability is a serious problem that the entire Puget Sound area is struggling with.
Yep.
And Tacoma, which has always been seen as far more affordable than, say, Seattle or the Bellevue area, is having affordability problems of its own now.
Absolutely.
And the city's just done some work on trying to figure out a way if there's some government can do to address that, right?
Absolutely. And we are going to get that final report. We'll be getting that final report. That is not just about identifying the problem. We know what the problem is. We need more affordable housing in Tacoma. And frankly, we need more housing in Tacoma. We need more affordable housing, but we need more housing in general in Tacoma. And so we'll be getting that report. And what I'm anxious to learn in the report, the final draft, is we're going to get some specific policy things that we can do to address affordability, and actually some numbers to go with it that says, okay, well, if we want to address permanent supportive housing, or if we want to address affordable housing, what things can we do in the city, and what would it cost us to do some of these things that will actually create more affordable housing? How can we work with developers? How can we make it easier for people to develop? I mean, we have the 8 and 12 year tax abatement, and at the 8 year you just get the tax abatement. At the 12 year you have to build some affordable. Well, what if there was another level, right, that took it down from 80% AMI to maybe 60% AMI? So those are some of the strategies that we're going to do. And when we think about affordability, I mean, we just learned that between 1990 and 2016, 98% of the houses increased in Tacoma. And rents increased by 39%.
Overall in Tacoma.
Wow. So, I mean, you can't, but if you figure the rent increased by 30%, but the income the median household income only increased by 20%. So we're not even making enough. We're not making enough at the same rate as we are actually the cost of housing is going up. And so one of the things that I think that helps address that, when we talk about affordability and people think we should only be building affordable housing, we have to build affordable housing. But we've also got to increase the housing stock, because the more housing you have, the less it costs. The less housing, the higher the demand, the more people can charge for it. Right. And so I think we've got to really look at where can we put in more density in our city, and how we can build more housing quickly.
Right. Now I know amongst the recommendations that come from the study will be things for like accessory dwelling units. Now we're just I'm not singling that out to pick on it, but it's just an example I think most people can easily relate to.
Right.
It's essentially the mother-in-law apartment or the mother-in-law house. In South Tacoma, when I was a kid, there was one of those in our neighborhood. The grandmother of one of my friends lived in the house behind her house on Oak Street. Okay. And I thought that was cool. Your grandma's there all the time. I mean, my grandma, my parents have to take me to go see my grandma. Right. I thought that was kind of cool. Tacoma allowed those back then. Absolutely. Then stopped allowing them. Right. And now may allow them again. I see this happen in other cities, and it becomes controversial. And some folks, I don't know whether it's just NIMBYism or what exactly it is, but I don't know how that, for example, some of these density strategies like for accessory dwelling units, I don't quite understand how they harm a neighborhood character at all.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm with you. I don't know that I would completely understand it. But we did launch a project, and it wasn't as popular as we thought it might be. So I think trying to figure out how we incentivize people to do that, or what does it take to make that more popular, certainly depending on the size of the ADU probably makes a difference. But for people who have a big backyard, like I have a big backyard, I could put an ADU in my backyard and not lose any of my backyard. Yeah, it increases the density for the neighborhood, but it's kind of behind my house, so nobody even really sees it. Right, so it's not like you're building these ADUs between houses. So you've got the big house and then the little house. Most ADUs are behind a house, and so not sure that I understand completely what the issue is with ADUs. I've not had a lot of people complain to me about ADUs, although I'm sure there's always the people on both sides of an issue. Right, and so it will be interesting. But we have got to. People are coming to Tacoma. Tacoma is going to grow, which means we've got to find strategies to accept the growth. Not building is not going to be one of them, because not building or increasing density in our city means that it's going to get even more unaffordable, and a lot of people are going to be priced out of this community. And I'm not talking about just low income people. I'm talking about working families are going to be priced out of Tacoma. And frankly, a lot of our low income families are working families. Right. And so those are going to be the people, the character of our city. We talk about gentrification, but I mean, it can happen in a rate that we don't even quite understand right now. So we've got to get more housing in Tacoma. We've got to be smart about it. We have to build density where it makes sense, on transportation corridors. Like I said earlier, one of the things that makes me so interested in our transportation infrastructure is, again, the fact that it's the second highest expense, in a household. Okay. So how do we build density in a way that like on MLK, how do we build it in a way that not only can you live there, you can walk to work, you can walk to a grocery store. So all the amenities that you need are right in your neighborhood. And that's got to be part of our strategy.
Right. I even do that even Northeast Tacoma. I mean,
it
is possible, even in Northeast Tacoma, which is a fairly car-oriented community, part of Tacoma, it is possible to walk to places and to the grocery store and to your doctor's office and to a variety of services that are walkable. It is. In Tacoma. Now, I can't easily walk from Northeast Tacoma to downtown Tacoma.
Well, that's a whole other story, but the fact that Northeast Tacoma is a perfect example. Northeast Tacoma is very dense. I mean, it's dense with houses, but it's very dense. And if we could get more services and a grocery store in the middle of Northeast Tacoma, I mean, it's about bringing services to a neighborhood so that, but the neighborhood obviously has to have the kind of density that warrants the success of that business. But Northeast Tacoma is a perfect example of what good density looks like.
Yep. And though you might want to have more grid streets and
Well,
less of that other stuff.
Yes, obviously, but yes.
But
That's the character of Northeast Tacoma,
that very much is the unique character there. But there's also, so we know ADUs will be part of this. Those other some things like duplexes and making it easier to build duplexes than we currently make it, because each unit has to get permits, and I know there's some technical stuff that needs to go on. But one of the other things the council is wrestling with right now is, I think, kind of the corollary to affordability, and that's tenant rights.
Yep.
We've had a couple of the Tiki apartments and the Merkel apartments, a couple of very emotional examples of folks who've lived in these apartments for forever and ever and ever,
right.
And suddenly the rents are skyrocketing up, and they're told 30 days to get out.
Yeah.
Now, Tacoma has long had kind of a minimum tenant rights program,
right.
Where we intervened with people, with tenants, for tenants' behalfs if there was a landlord that was abusing their privileges. But so it's not actually new to Tacoma, but we're going to make it a lot more comprehensive.
Absolutely, which I think is a smart thing to do. If we didn't learn anything from the Tiki apartments, we did learn a lot. But if we didn't learn anything else, we did learn we have got to be more comprehensive, and we've got to put some stuff in place. I think we kind of had tenant rights, but nothing had really happened to test how good those rights were. And the Tiki apartment situation tested those rights, and we found out it wasn't enough. In the Merkel case, obviously they've had a lot longer time. They've had since May, almost 6 months, 5 months, but part of it is, and Randall, I'll answer the question, but again, it gets back to, even there's just not enough, there's just not enough places for people to go who are paying that kind of rent. And landlords have the right to want to clean up and better their properties, but we also should ensure that while they have a right to do that piece, that the right of the people who are living there are protected, and that they get enough time, and that they, then they're treated with respect, and that, the laws aren't being broken to move them. We always lift up Tiki, as an example, and then now we're lifting up Merkel. I venture to say that somebody experiences that every single day in the city. Yeah. And so these rights, while those big examples were lifted up for us to look at tenant rights, there are tenants whose rights are being violated every single day.
And I know we want to get into the subject of homelessness, and this kind of flows directly to that, because the affordability of housing is kind of one of the issues that leads to homelessness.
Absolutely.
And we've certainly seen an increase. I think the city should take nothing from anyone about how it's stepped up to do this. The stability site has been it's cost some money. Recent newspaper column said you could question the numbers for the number of people that have been put into housing, but it's done more than just put people to housing. It's allowed people to live in places that were far more secure and sanitary and safe for them,
absolutely,
and for the community, than where they were living before in large encampments that are just unregulated, health hazards.
Absolutely.
And so it's helped in that regard. But what's the future? I mean, Tacoma has stepped up. The county's beginning to do some things at last in terms of homelessness, to their credit. But you don't see a whole lot else going on in Pierce County, and you're going to have a meeting in Puyallup, which is kind of an interesting place to have a meeting, because they seem to be going the opposite direction. Well,
but you said it all starts with affordability, and I am really excited that we're partnering with County Executive Dan Meyer and with County Council Member Connie Ladenburg, and we're hosting a regional meeting with all the mayors of the cities and towns, as well as the Puyallup tribe. We're hosting this meeting for all of us to sit down and talk about affordability and the effects of affordability. Sure, certainly homelessness is one of them, but as a county, we've got to have a regional strategy about how we address affordability, which is the linchpin. Like, we can keep addressing housing, at the end, but in order to get upstream, affordable housing, housing's got to be the issue that we address. So we can address homelessness at the end, but if we've got to start up here if we want to stop having to work down here. And so having that conversation and having it in Puyallup Puyallup's a middle place. We all have got to talk about affordability. So it's not, I may have been the one to help call the meeting, But it's not about being my meeting. It's about how do we regionally and countywide look at this issue. And we're going to start with the issue at hand, which is affordability. So getting back, kind of talking about, what we do here in Tacoma, we have a lot of great partners. And so one of the things I think that's been helpful is talking to our partners about how we increase their capacity. And not their capacity by doubling it, but can everybody just do a little bit more across the board that helps? I will also say this, you're right, the stability site does more than give people, a place to sleep. There's showers, there's clothes, there's activities for them to do. There is, they have a caseworker, so someone's caseworking them, they get into permanent housing. Through this program, they're able to find jobs through this program. So we're doing more at the stability side, and that's thanks to all of our partners. And I wouldn't even begin to name them because I couldn't name them all. But that's helpful. But I also believe that one of the things that we're doing at the stability side is we are housing the hardest to serve. And that's one issue that we've got to have a conversation in our community is what does permanent supportive housing look like? There are going to be some people who can get back on their feet and we can get them an apartment or a house and they'll be able to, pick themselves up, dust themselves off and keep going. But there's a segment of our community who's going to need help all the time, who's going to need round-the-clock care, but not in a hospital or not in a mental institution, right? They're just going to need some support. And so permanent supportive housing is something we've got to talk about too, because that's what we're housing at our stability site in some instances is the hardest to serve. The goal is to take 2019 as a transition year, transition out of the stability site, and find capacity in other places with other partners, and then hopefully do away with the stability site. That's the goal. You got to have a goal in mind. Right. My goal is to eradicate homelessness, right? So you got to have an ending. You got to have something to look to and make sure that everything that you're doing is leading you towards that. So I mean, those are our plans for 2019. Again, we're going to continue to work with this, with our community and our partners to figure out what other things can we put in place.
When you talk about the partners, you're talking about the social service agencies that provide a lot of the services, but also the city's made significant changes to its ordinances regarding what they call tent cities. The stability site is essentially a tent city, but we've talked about with a number of the churches about whether they could step up and actually help with shelter spaces in church sites. Because in other parts of the state and in other parts of the country, churches play an active role in that and just haven't in Tacoma. Part of that was because the city's ordinance was pretty restrictive on that.
Right.
But that's all been changed.
But it has. But they also, so we have Bethlehem Baptist Church on the east side is one church I know that's actually that is actually working with families, and they're housing people there. But because of those churches, churches have always played a role. So when you go down to the stability side and they talk about, people coming with donations and they bring food and clothes and all that, that's what our churches are doing. Our churches now have even stepped up. And have produced a report about how we address affordable housing in our community and deal with homelessness. And that report was put together in partnership with Associated Ministries and our faith community. And so they're seeing their role in this. And we as a city have to make room for them and let them step up and have a role, like whether it's housing people at their churches or providing programming, all that kind of, our faith community really is part of the backbone of how we provide the services. But I think as a city, we could stand to get a little bit more organized around that. That's why I'm excited to see at some point a volunteer coordinator to help us coordinate all of the people who want to do work in our city and be able to do it in a strategic way that really has the best impact.
All right. Now, another component of homelessness, besides affordability, that we know this is a component, is the opioid crisis in America.
Absolutely.
This is a nationwide problem.
Absolutely.
And the city's taken some aggressive action here, too. We've sued opioid manufacturers.
We have.
Before the county did. And though the county prosecutor has joined in that.
And the state has too, right? But we were first, I believe, right?
I think we were.
Okay.
And then you have some elected officials locally who took on the issue as a kind of a gathering to get people together to talk about what the role we should take on next. And so this is something that we've also then pursued at the national level as well. Right?
We have. Earlier this year, time flies by so fast. We were chosen as one of 6 cities by the National League of Cities. They asked cities to submit a proposal, and they were going to choose 6 cities to participate in what they're calling the Mayoral Institute on Opioids. So mayors had to participate, but it's a year of convenings, of technical expertise, of support for cities who are working to combat the opioid crisis. And so I'm proud to say that Tacoma was chosen. We are one of 6 cities. We are the only city west of the Mississippi who was chosen. So cities like Manchester, New Haven, and Huntington, West Virginia, Knoxville, Tennessee, Madison, Wisconsin, and New Bedford, Maine. Those are the other 5 cities. We were able to go back to Boston in June for a gathering to learn about what other cities are doing. And then we'll go back again in November for another gathering. And then we're on a monthly call with them where they're providing technical support. Thanks to Councilmember Connor McCarthy and or City Councilmember Connor McCarthy and then County Council Member Derek Young, they are working. They are co-chairs of our Pierce County Regional Task Force. And they actually had been meeting and working on this even before this opportunity came forward. So we were really excited that we could lift up the work that we were doing already and how their support could help us do even greater work. But they have come back, and with the help of the health department in actually hiring someone to help us coordinate this effort, the Pierce County Partnership has now broken down into committees, and they've got 3 committees, and they're right services at the right time, access to treatment, and prevention and education. So they're deploying these 3 committees, again, with NGOs, with non-governmental organizations, and with nonprofits, and who are staffing these committees to actually implement some policies and some programs to actually address these 3 areas. So we're getting local support as well as national support and resources to be able to address the opioid epidemic in Tacoma and Pierce County.
Well, that's great, and we're going to have to leave it there and get back to you on that subject next time you're here, Mayor.
All right,
Thank you for being here today.
Thanks. It was a pleasure to be here.
Our guest has been Mayor Victoria Woodards. We look forward to seeing you next time here on Inside Tacoma.